Hello there. Welcome into a Thursday edition of the show. So glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the Extra Sports 1300 app to do your listening. And that app that is free to download and free to use is sponsored by Diversus Health. Mental health and well-being for all, a veritable cornucopia of sports topics await you as we begin week 2 in the NFL tonight. Commanders and Packers. You can hear the game right here on Extra Sports 1300. Our coverage from Westwood One begins at 5:30. If you would like to give your thoughts on any of today's topics, I would love to hear it. You could call or text into the show at 719-247-1313. Coming up in, a little less than 20 minutes, Jonathan Smith will join me. He's a radio host out in Indianapolis, so we'll get the Colts perspective on this Week 2 tilt coming up on Sunday. And to that end, Sean Payton knows that his team is extremely, extremely fortunate that they are not going into Indy with an 0-1 record.
Last week's teams were 8-1 when they won the turnover battle, and the one was us. And you can't live that way. It's tough. In other words, you're going to play better teams, and so, but clearly they were +3 in that game, and every then statistic, if you looked at it, fell in their favor.
And in the last part of it, he was talking about Indianapolis and in the stats. But any other team, the Broncos are losing that opener. Any other team. If they do that again, and that's the point Sean Payton is making. One, just in general, you're very fortunate to lose a turnover battle and still win a football game. But what he's saying is they do that same thing against Indy, they will lose. But as much as the turnovers were on Bo Nix, Sean Payton took a fair amount of the blame when it comes to the Broncos' struggles offensively on Sunday.
I don't know how many games I've called, but that's one of those where, it came away from it like, man, I've got to be a lot better. And
you can look at it and say, well, it's easy for Sean Payton to do that. That's what you want coaches to do. You want them to deflect blame. And I think there is... Cortland Sutton was asked about this yesterday. I think there's a feeling within the Denver Broncos that they need to make sure that Bo Nix isn't putting too much on his shoulders. Just in terms of, him believing he has to be the sole reason why, not the sole reason, but the main reason they win football games. Right? There's just this feeling right now, and it manifested itself on the field with some of the extracurricular stuff Bo Nix was doing, that he was just putting too much pressure on himself. And I think there are conversations going on right now with Bo Nix to say, hey, man, we love that you're a competitor. We love that you want to take on the responsibility and you want to be our leader, but you don't have to. I think the line from Cortland Sutton was, the weight is not on his shoulders. It's on all of our shoulders. And I'm sure there are conversations going on through that. But when Sean Payton says that, I don't think it's lip service. I don't think it's him just trying to deflect blame away from his young quarterback. Because you watch the game and you know that Sean Payton did not do Bo Nix any favors. He asked him to throw the ball 40 times in week 1 against a team that it was so abundantly clear that the Broncos could have had success early and often running the football. So in some cases, I would hear what Sean Payton said. And I would go, yeah, he's just trying to stick up for his young quarterback, trying to deflect blame. No, more of Sunday was definitely on Sean Payton. What he should have done is come out, run the football, take pressure off of Bo Nix, let Bo Nix run things off of a successful run game, and go about it that way instead of saying, hey, it's going to be the Bo Nix show here in the first quarter because we want to send some kind of a message. I think Sean Payton looked at the opponent, not necessarily the strengths and weaknesses of the Tennessee Titans, but just looked at the fact that they were the worst team in football last year and said, let my young quarterback cook. Let me cook by extension, right? Let me get cute with the play calling. Let me get a little fancy here. Let me roll Bo Nix out to the left instead of the right. He just overthought himself on Sunday. And the game plan was obvious from the get-go. I identified it on Friday. It was run the football. Broncos didn't do that till late in the game, and you saw the results. Right? Things got a lot more comfortable in that fourth quarter when they started feeding J.K. Dobbins and R.J. Harvey started popping big runs. Now, it's hard to tell whether Indy will do the same thing against Denver that they did against Miami. They did not really respect the run game of the Miami Dolphins. So I think the fact that they didn't load up the box, they didn't commit extra numbers to the run game is more of a reflection on who they were playing than who they are. I would expect Indy to go into this game with a healthy amount of respect for the Broncos run game. But that being said, the Broncos still need to establish the run. That's still a big piece of this team this year is can they run the football? Can they be a more well-balanced offense? And thus take pressure off of Bo Nix. And if Indy is able to slow down the Broncos run game, then okay, the game is dictating that Bo Nix has got to do more. I wouldn't feel good about that if I'm a Broncos fan. But at least the game is dictating it rather than the Broncos taking themselves out of what the best game plan for Sunday would have been. Now, this is kind of a rare occasion in that this is not an AFC West opponent yet. The Broncos are playing them in back-to-back years. So that game last year, I think, is still fresh in everyone's mind. How much rollover there is another story. I think there's some. But like Shane Steichen said it the other day, like he's not the type of guy to go around and tell his team, remember what they did to you and try to use it as a motivating factor. If guys want to use it as a motivating factor, go for it. It won't be something that he talks about. But it allows us to have a better idea of what Indy is and what the Broncos look like against Indy. Some personnel has changed. Obviously, they have a different quarterback. They have a different tight end who I want to talk about a lot today. But if you think back to that game, specifically with Bo Nix, that was one of those games late in the season where Bo Nix started being a little bit careless with the football, as has been a trend with him as of late. He threw 3 picks in that game. And I went back and watched it. First pick, he's thrown into double coverage after just scrambling to pick up a first down. The second one was on the opening drive of the half. After 3 straight passes, he overthrew Cortland Sutton downfield on a 3rd and 1. And then the third one, he telegraphed that he was throwing it to Cortland Sutton. The Colts corner jumped the route and picked it off. There are a couple of themes that I identified with those picks and with a lot of the interceptions that Bo Nix has thrown recently. It's Bo Nix trying to do too much. You don't need to throw it deep downfield to Cortland Sutton on a 3rd and 1. Right? I mean, I know that was the play design and they were trying to open that up, but clearly Cortland Sutton was not wide open. There had to be another read on that play that on a 3rd and 1 would have been smarter for Bo Nix to take. But also Cortland Sutton is a theme. Right? One of his 2 picks on Sunday against Tennessee was him trying to force the ball into Cortland Sutton. So if I'm Indianapolis or any other team, I'm looking at Cortland Sutton and I'm saying we need to stick on this guy. Because we're still too early in the season for another weapon outside of Cortland Sutton to truly emerge. They need to have somebody emerge, right? Didn't see a lot of Evan Ingram. He got hurt late in that game. He's trending to play on Sunday. But if I'm an opposing team, I'm trying to chat up Bo Nix a little bit. I'm going to try to get into his head, under his skin, because he's shown that you can do that to him. And also, I'm looking at number 14. And I'm saying if Bo Nix is going to do something silly, it's going to be to Cortland Sutton more often than not. He's going to get into situations where he's going to try and force the ball to Cortland Sutton. But this is, again, getting back to the original thought here, which is the Denver Broncos need to do more right now to help Bo Nix than he needs to do for them. Okay, and his over-reliance on Cortland Sutton, the fact that he played 95% of the snaps, the fact that a lot of his interceptions are being when he's targeting Cortland Sutton, this is where the Broncos Sunday and moving forward need to help Bo Nix out. They got to figure out how to free up somebody else. Right? And it's the premise that you bring in Evan Ingram to create those matchup problems. Create a matchup problem somewhere else where Bo Nix can clearly see another wide receiver that's not Cortland Sutton and deliver him the football. On Sunday, it was almost an even split between Troy Franklin, who Bo Nix threw the second interception trying to force it into double coverage, and Marvin Mims. Marvin Mims emerged a little bit last year. As this season goes on, the Broncos have got to try and find that second option in the pass game. And I say second option. It doesn't have to be wide receiver. It doesn't have to be Mims. Doesn't have to be Franklin. It can be Ingram. It could be, R.J. Harvey out of the backfield. But the more I look at these mistakes that Bo Nix is making more and more over the last 5 games of last year and Sunday against the Tennessee Titans, Cortland Sutton's at the center of a lot of them. And I know he's the number 1 wide receiver, so there's a little bit of a law of averages thing, but there is kind of an over-reliance on Cortland Sutton right now with this Broncos team. And even though the game plan should be run the football and then work off of that in the play action game and the passing game, when they do get to the passing game, look Sunday to see Bo Nix looking 14's direction time and time and time again. Because if he is, you're catching it late. You know who caught it before that? Indianapolis. Right? We're a step behind. On the field, they got those iPads and Microsoft Surface tablets. If you get to a point on Sunday where you're like, man, Bo Nix is really looking Cortland Sutton's way a lot. Indy's already there. And that's where some mistakes can happen, especially if things aren't quite working out the way that the Broncos envision, if Bo Nix is struggling a little bit, he's going to look to 14 to get him out of it. And I think that's definitely part of what Indianapolis is game planning for coming up on Sunday. But Broncos still week 2 of season 2 for Bo Nix need to do more to help him than he needs to do to help them. There will come a time where it's okay, Bo Nix, you got to be the hero. We're not there yet. We shouldn't be there yet. And we shouldn't be there on Sunday. Broncos need to help him out. 719-247-1313. Just getting going on this Thursday edition of the show. Coming up next, what do the Colts have in store for Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos? Jonathan Smith, my guest after this. Welcome back. Drive Time Sports. Week 2 of the NFL season begins tonight with Washington and Green Bay, but around these parts, it's all about Sunday. Indy and Denver, week 2, two teams that are both 1-0, but are coming into the game with a very different feeling about that first win of the season. Joining me now to talk about the Colts and what they might have planned for the Denver Broncos is the host of the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy's Sports Ticket 1430. He is, of course, Jonathan Smith, but because if he hosted a show called the Real Jonathan Smith Show and his name was like Doug, it'd be weird. Jonathan, appreciate the time. How are you?
I'm good, Ryan. How are you?
There we go.
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm not technologically savvy. So first things first. So it's Unitas, then it was Manning, then it was Luck, and now it's Daniel Jones. Yes, are we there after week 1?
We're not there. No.
Okay.
We're not there quite yet. We might be though if he plays well this week. A lot of people will want to be there. I don't know if I'll be there. You got to play more than 2 good games to erase the last 6 years in New York.
I think that's a fair assessment on your part. But what did Daniel Jones do in that game against Miami that Anthony Richardson wouldn't or couldn't do?
So if you ask that question to Shane Steichen would tell you all the stuff that he does pre-snap is what separated him from Richardson, setting the right protection, getting in and out of the right plays. So that was probably a large part of it. Steichen talked about that a little bit after the game. But just from like a physical standpoint, watching it, he didn't miss easy throws. Every easy throw that he had, he made. As someone who liked the talent of Anthony Richardson coming out of Florida, that was always the biggest thing with him. You know, you'd have guys wide open in the flat, and he'd throw it into the third row of the stands. And so Daniel Jones just completed passes that you expect for starting quarterbacks in the NFL to complete.
Yeah, I heard the question asked of Shane Steichen that he didn't do anything out of the ordinary or extraordinary. But as you know, Jonathan, sometimes those are the things that separate the good quarterbacks from the great ones and the less than good ones from the good ones. So how did they create those easy passes for Daniel Jones?
Shane Steichen is a really smart offensive coach. And, you know, like I know here in Indy, people have kind of questioned whether or not Shane Steichen's a good coach. I would argue he is. He's 17-17 through 2 seasons, or I guess he's 18-17 now, with his quarterbacks having been Anthony Richardson, whose career completion percentage is 51%, Gardner Minshew, and Joe Flacco. Like, if you can go 500 with those 3 guys, then and on top of that, he's never had a defense that ranked better than 28th in the NFL. So he's just a very offensive savvy guy. The weapons for the Colts are pretty solid. Bringing in Tyler Warren, like you could tell kind of right off the rip how important he's going to be. So I think it's just a mixture of the weapons that the Colts have and just Shane's. I wouldn't call him a genius because I don't think he's Shanahan or anyone like that, but he's probably like a step below genius when it comes to the offensive side of the ball.
I was somewhat disheartened that the Colts ended up taking Tyler Warren because I was banging the drum quite loudly for him to be in Denver in this draft. And obviously he got a lot of run on Sunday. How are they using him?
That's a really good question. It's really exciting because Steichen has talked about how he wants to move him around. So, like, for example, week 1, they lined him up at fullback on 3rd and 1, and they handed it off to him. And so that was a big deal. All of his receptions, he had 6 for 73.
Uh-oh. Lost Jonathan.
Am I good? Sorry, someone called me. Sorry about that.
How make sure you let them know after we're done how rude that was to call you not knowing that you're No, but you said you said on 3rd and 1 they gave him the ball as fullback.
Yes, and then all of his receptions kind of came over the middle of the field.
Okay.
So it seems like they're going to kind of work him there in the middle. So Slight step up in competition this week, dealing with guys like Dre Greenlaw and Hufunga coming down from safety. But he'll be good. So I'm very excited, and Steichen, as I said, pretty creative. So it'll be interesting to see if they move him around more this week.
Yeah, I don't know if I would bet on Dre Greenlaw, but Hufunga will definitely be around, and he was somebody that defensive coordinator Vance Joseph talked a lot about today as well with the Denver Broncos. Jonathan Smith, my guest, host of the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy's Sports Ticket 1430. How much talk has there been about not just the fact that they played Denver last year, but the way that game went, because it could have very easily been a Colts win?
Yeah, there's been a lot of conversation around it. I think the biggest thing, people are expecting a really big day from Jonathan Taylor, just because, dropping the football before he crossed the goal line, and that really kind of flipped the game on its head. I know that there's been a lot of pleading that there's no double reverse passes. Yeah. And so there's been quite a bit of conversation about it, in really a positive manner of if Jonathan Taylor doesn't drop that football, then I'm not going to say that the Colts win the game, but they're definitely in a pretty good position to do that. So I think there's some confidence given how it looked last year before that play.
Just getting back to Tyler Warren for a second, if you are the Denver Broncos, are you most worried about him or Michael Pittman?
If I'm the Broncos, I'm probably more worried about Tyler Warren, because you can just have Surtain follow Pittman.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, when you have the best corner in the NFL, it makes it really easy,
Right. Well, and that's something I'm going to get into later. Should Surtain cover Warren? Right. And then the way I'm thinking about Jonathan is, okay, if Surtain, being who Surtain is, let's say he can limit Tyler Warren. Well, you kind of saw Michael Pittman go off a little bit against Miami, and I almost wonder if it'd be more productive for the Denver defense to commit other guys but more attention to Warren, and then, to your point, making sure that maybe second option or that other guy that Daniel Jones would most likely look to, have him being taken away by Surtain,
Yeah, so you're saying double Warren and leave Surtain for Pittman?
Like something like that. As much as I love Tyler Warren, as much as I feel like if Daniel Jones doesn't have Tyler Warren at his disposal, that it could put him in a tricky situation. I just look at what Michael Pittman did against Miami and go, if they commit Surtain to Warren, that could easily be their same fate, 80 yards and a touchdown.
Yeah, I just think it'd be really tough to commit Surtain to Warren, just because they had him in line a lot last week. They didn't split him out wide very often, and I just think that Denver's defensive alignment would be off if they were to commit Surtain like that. So what I'd guess that they do is they'll probably commit Surtain to Pittman, and then use some combination of Hufunga and your slot corners to kind of deal with Warren. Plus, I don't know, this could be wrong, but I feel like the Broncos should be more concerned about a guy, Michael Pittman Jr., who's been good for the last 7 years now, as opposed to Warren, who's played one game.
That's a fair point. And Vance Joseph, the defensive coordinator, he's most worried about Jonathan Taylor. So it just speaks to how many weapons Daniel Jones does have at his disposal on Sunday. Let's flip things a little bit. What would be the Colts' game plan against Bo Nix and the Broncos offense?
I'm assuming it's going to look a lot like what it did last week against Miami. Just a lot of, it just felt like Lou Anarumo threw a lot of junk at Tua. They've got, they're showing 7 blitzers. He's got some people falling out and others coming. And there was one play where Tua threw a pick to Leatu Latu, one of the Colts edge rushers, because he dropped not one, but both of the Colts defensive ends into coverage. And Bo Nix was awesome last year. But with that being said, it is only year 2. So I'm kind of expecting for Lou Anarumo to try to muddy the waters a bit and try to confuse Bo Nix.
And a lot of the focus is on, Tyler Warren and Pat Surtain and all this, but Nick Benito versus Latu Latu is a pretty good. They were, I think, Pro Football Focus had those two as the two top-rated edge rushers in Week 1. Talk about Latu and what he brings to the table.
Everyone here in Indy's kind of hoping that he's going to be the next Dwight Freeney, Robert Mathis kind of guy. They took him last year in the NFL draft. He was the first defensive player taken off the board.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, like if you just looked at like his pure production numbers, you'd be like, he wasn't very good. Like he only had 4 sacks. But if you look at like his pressure rates and all those things, like they're really high. It just seems like he's a tick away from being like a 9 or 10 sack guy. And Week 1 kind of felt the same way, kind of with his pass rush, like a lot of him getting close, but just not quite getting the sack. So hopefully, I know that the Broncos' offensive line is supposed to be really good this year, but hopefully this is the week that he can get there just a little bit quicker.
Yeah, well, and Tennessee showed if you could pressure Bo Nix, you're going to pressure him into potentially making some mistakes, and we'll see if the Colts end up doing that on Sunday. Last thing before I let you go, Jonathan, it had been a while since the Colts did what they did on Sunday, which is win an opener. Obviously, the emotion surrounding honoring the late Jim Irsay. Is there any part of you that thinks, and the fact that they, scored on every possession, is there any part of you that says potential letdown game for the Colts?
I don't think it'll be a letdown because of the game that happened last year. I think because it's a lot of the same guys. I think that this is one of the ones that you kind of circle before the year started.
Yeah. Well, it should be a good one. Far more interesting, I think, both because of how good Indy looked Week 1, but also maybe how the Broncos left something to be desired. A lot of talk around here about how the Broncos pick things up, especially offensively, this week and beyond. Jonathan, really appreciate the time and the insight, and enjoy the game on Sunday.
Anytime, man. Thanks.
Yep, my pleasure. That is Jonathan Smith. He is the host of the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket 1430. You could follow him on X if you choose. I believe there are 2 underscores, and then Jonathan, Jonathan Smith, if you'd like to follow him for more Colts insight. Good stuff there. And I want to get into the Tyler Warren of it all and some of the stuff that Jonathan and I were talking about, how you deal with Warren, how much do you worry about Michael Pittman, and then, of course, Vance Joseph, as I mentioned, is most concerned with Jonathan Taylor. So we'll get into that in a little bit. Coming up next, Sean Payton gave his thoughts on the stadium that the Broncos are going to have open in 2031. So does that mean he's planning on being the Broncos coach in 2031? You'll hear from Sean Payton next on Extra Sports 1300. Time is running out for you to vote on this week's Extra Sports Athlete of the Week, sponsored by Blackjack Pizza and Salads. Right now, it's shaping up to be a nail-biter between Greg Moore, the Lewis Palmer running back, and Luke McAllister of Cheyenne Mountain Soccer. Those two have the majority of the vote, but right now it's neck and neck between those two. There's still plenty of time to vote for all four of our nominees at extrasports1300.com, and the winner will hopefully be joining me on the show tomorrow. And while you are voting, and you have, I'm sure you do, a deserving prep athlete in our area that you want to nominate, you can do so as well at extrasports1300.com. Obviously, the new stadium for the Denver Broncos is pretty big news, and Sean Payton was going to get asked about it. And Sean Payton, the first place he went was not a surprising place. It is what many people are debating in Broncos country, and that is the roof that will be on the top of the Broncos' new stadium. Here's Sean Payton.
I know the one thing I kept reading was, man, we're used to the snow and the elements, and I'm not gonna speak for Greg and Kerry, but those will all exist.
Okay. Those will all exist, and you don't want to speak for them. Is it because you're going to be the coach in 2031?
Collectively, you guys, myself, Patrick, our goal is to be here to participate in that new vision. But I think it's great for the city.
If Sean Payton were around, and we act like 2031 is a lifetime away, it's really not. But Sean Payton is not one of the younger coaches in the NFL. In fact, he is one of the oldest. But when 2031 rolls around, he will be the same age as Andy Reid is right now. Now, with that fact, I take into account that Andy Reid is currently the steward of a dynasty. So I think it's a little bit easier for Andy Reid to get up every morning knowing that he's going to be coaching the Kansas City Chiefs. But I don't think this is a hot take. Short of the Denver Broncos becoming a dynasty between now and then, you will have to ask the question that at, 67 years old, having done a ton of coaching, I know he's not going to be nearly as far into his Broncos tenure as he was his Saints tenure by then, but you have to wonder about some coaches getting up there in age, whether Sean Payton will still want to do it. Every indication is he does, and I believe him because I think what appealed to him, and it was funny yesterday, he mentioned, I didn't seek out the division with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. He was looking for the ownership situation to be right. He wants to build something in Denver like he built something in New Orleans. There are some differences, I suppose, with Denver. It's more about getting Denver back to prominence rather than bringing the Saints to prominence. But it's the same general premise. He's building something up. And he wants to see that thing through to at least a Super Bowl appearance, if not a Super Bowl title. Now, he believes that is happening sooner rather than later, as you are well aware. But if the Broncos don't do that between now and the new stadium, I could see Sean Payton still chasing that because the job wouldn't be finished for him if he didn't get the Broncos back to a place they've been quite a bit throughout their history. So a lot can happen even though it's not that far away. At least I choose to believe it's not that 6 years from now is not that far away. We'll see what happens between now and then. But Sean Payton, he's not overseeing a dynasty, but he's trying to build something. And I think that in some way the stadium is a part of that. Like, I think he wants to usher in the new era of Denver Broncos football, which now this stadium is a part of. And don't think for a second that Greg and Kerry Penner did not share with him their plans for a new stadium and the plans for a new practice facility and all this kind of stuff. So I think Sean Payton really likes being a part of all of this. And it would be weird for him to bow out before that happened, before the Broncos got into the new stadium. So when I first heard that, I was like, wow, he's going to be one of the older coaches in the NFL. And I promise you by 2031, Andy Reid's not coaching anymore. Pete Carroll's not coaching anymore. Sean Payton might be the oldest. It's a race between him and Harbaugh, right? He might be the oldest coach in the NFL by the time 2031 comes around. So when he first said that, I was like, oh, wait, is Sean Payton going to be definitely around for that? But I think he is. Because it's about building this franchise back up and the new era and the vision and all that kind of stuff that he talks about constantly. He loves that he's a part of this stuff. And I think it would be really weird for him to bow out before he got to coach the team in the new stadium. I could see in the next few years, if Davis Webb doesn't get hired, I could see like a coach in waiting type thing, or Sean Payton relinquishing more of his duties. Not this year, not next year, not the year after that, but like as we get closer to 2031, I could see that a potential baton handing from Sean Payton to Davis Webb if Davis Webb does not get a job before then, which he might. But so getting back to the weather part of this, why does Sean Payton think it's so important to have the elements?
But I just think the elements are important. I think, and I think certainly, I know from speaking with Greg and Kerry and their vision and plan, just having that flexibility to control it to some degree.
And I think that's what my personal opinion aside, because my opinion, and I know I'm on one end of the spectrum on this, no weather. I am anti-weather. And I know I live in like the worst state because we have all the weather here. But there, the majority of the time we have very good weather, but sometimes we have really crappy weather. And we have all the different kinds of weathers, and I'm generally just not a big fan. Look, the roof is not going to be open in a blizzard. Okay, like it's just not. That would be silly. But the temperature, some slight snow flurries, perhaps there's a little tug of war going on between Sean Payton and ownership in terms of keeping the roof open or not. But there's something else you have to think about here, and it goes to my point about, being anti-weather. I saw something today that said that the Broncos are the 9th most expensive team to see in person. When you take into account parking, concessions, tickets, Broncos are 9th, and not in a good way, right? You want to be in the bottom 10, not the top 10. They're already the 9th most expensive team to go see. They might end up being number 1 in 2031. And this is a little something that, like, I'm not trying to be a buzzkill, but I'm just saying everyone's all swept up on how cool this is, and I'm with you. Like, it's going to be awesome to have a state-of-the-art stadium and have the chance to host Super Bowls and Final Fours and things like that, because I think Colorado is a great sports state, especially for these big events. But the other side of this, I mentioned it the other day with the PSLs that you're going to be asked to pay for. Broncos are going to be one of the most expensive teams in the NFL to go watch in 2031. And you've seen this with the Avalanche, to me, have always been quite expensive. The Nuggets have become expensive with their success. And that's another part of this too. Broncos are more successful under Sean Payton than they have been in previous years. So you have the success, you have the new stadium. Broncos are going to not be a cheap ticket. They're going to be very expensive, and there are going to be fans, and I can already hear it and see it now. Fans are going to complain because it is going to be prohibitive to get into these games. But I bring that up to say part of my reasoning for being pro-roof is that I want an enjoyable experience. I get the home field advantage. I get all of that football stuff. I'm looking at it from an entertainment standpoint, and I don't want to freeze going to a football game. I don't. It's too expensive. And the Broncos are going to be even more expensive when they have this new stadium. I think Sean Payton's going to be maybe disappointed in the games that he would rather the roof be open, but it will be closed. But that, you know what? Those are the breaks. The paying customers are the most important thing here. And the paying customers are going to pay more than they ever have before to be in this stadium. They shouldn't be subjected to freezing temperatures and a blizzard just for the sake of the Broncos having an advantage over the Miami Dolphins. So that's kind of something that will happen down the road. But the Broncos will be one of the most expensive tickets in the National Football League. And you have that roof there that can make the experience in the stadium better for most people by closing it on a crummy day, as few and far between as they are in Colorado, if we're being fair. But that thing's got to be closed. It's too expensive for fans to be miserable just for the sake of a home field advantage. So I think there's going to be a happy medium in here where Sean Payton may not get his way all the time. 719-24-7, 1313. Take your thoughts. Will Sean Payton be at the ripe old age of 67 when the new stadium? I know Pete Carroll has warped our view of reality on coaches and how long they can coach and how old they can be, but he's the oldest by a pretty wide margin. And then it's Reed, who's in a special circumstance. And then next on the list, about 5 or 6 years behind, are Jim Harbaugh and Sean Payton. 719-24-7, 1313. Coming up next, the Broncos have talked so much this offseason and lead up to the season about what they can do with the Joker. Well, how about what they can do to defend a Joker? That's next here on Extra Sports 1300. Welcome in hour 2 on this Thursday. Commanders and Packers tonight. You can hear our coverage starting at 5:30. That'll be a fun matchup, won't it? You know, these matchups early in the season, they're so good. And then later in the season, the same matchup, you'll go, this is a bad matchup. And it's just because injuries and sometimes the team fails to meet expectation, but all good so far for the Packers and Commanders, both 1-0. Jay Schroeder I read today, was the last Washington quarterback to win in Lambeau. So Jaden Daniels going up against someone he's very familiar with, and Micah Parsons, just in a different uniform. That'll be a good one. 5:30, our coverage begins from Westwood One. In the meantime, appreciate you tuning into the show, especially if you're watching the show on our social media platforms, whether it be Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube. The handle all the same across all platforms at XTRA Sports 1300. While you're there, you can like, subscribe, drop a comment. There's no shortage of things you can do on social media these days, or you can reach out the traditional way by calling or texting in. I don't know why texting is a traditional way. I guess it is nowadays. 719-247-1313. Before I move to the Colts, and there's a piece of news out with the Colts that may impact Sunday's game. Want to get to a couple of your thoughts. Was just talking about Sean Payton wanting the roof to stay open as much as possible when presumably he's the head coach of the Broncos in 2031. I say that's all well and good, but you, the fan, matter more. And you are going to pay more for Broncos tickets in 2031 than you've ever paid for Broncos tickets before, and it might be by a wide margin. You deserve to be comfortable. You deserve to enjoy your experience. And that is, in the end, what sports is. It is entertainment. It is for you. You are the most important thing. So I get the sentiment of Sean Payton. I'm sure that the Broncos will not use the roof maybe as much as some other places with retractable roofs, just because the weather usually is very nice here. But when it gets bad, sorry. No snow globe games in Denver anymore. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't. This from the 571, the most arrogant coach in the NFL giving up some control, please. Well, that is true. I am talking about Sean Payton. And when I said that about him relinquishing control to Davis Webb, I was like, do I really believe this? I think Davis Webb could be the head coach in waiting of the Denver Broncos. I'll put it that way. How much Sean Payton allows him to do. It's one thing to call plays in a second preseason game where you're not playing any of your starters. It's another thing having game day play calling during the regular season. But again, 2031 is a few years away. Texter adds, if they want a Super Bowl, it will have to be domed or closable stadium roof. Retractable roofs break too much, too expensive to maintain. My guess is dome stadium. Of course, the Waltons do have a lot of money. They do. I guess I don't know what's the difference between, they're not getting a dome. They're not doing that. Domes are done. So is it, say, closable? Would that be like SoFi? I guess I'm not educated on the nuanced differences between stadium roofs. But the plan is that Denver's new stadium can be open air and closed. So whatever roof they need to do to get that done, and your sentiment is correct, whatever the best roof is, and I don't mean this, as a backhanded compliment. Like, I think that Greg Penner and Kerry Walton Penner have hit all the right notes since becoming owners. I think they are very good owners because, most importantly, they do exactly what you're suggesting. They write a check and get out of the way. And Sean Payton even yesterday talked about that a little bit. Like, there's a level of accountability, certainly. They're not completely hands-off, but they let people do their job. And those are the best owners. I have no quarrel whatsoever with the Broncos ownership. And I think the stadium site and getting the new stadium and not raising taxpayer taxes to pay for it, I think just with the big stadium monitor and the new grass that they put in every once in a while and the new practice facility, they haven't had a misstep yet. And I may disagree with Sean Payton at times, but it's turned out to be a pretty good hire so far. So whatever roof they need to get to avoid Broncos fans suffering through a blizzard, get that and still be able to utilize the fact that we have 300 days of sunshine. As was once written on the Nuggets court, if you remember that. Brett says Denver is becoming more and more a Dodger crowd. They show up late, make sure they are seen, and then they leave, not even realizing they went to a sports ball game. Is that? Because that is around, especially around these parts. That is a bold claim to make. And that is emotionally charged. Is that the case with the Broncos? I know that's the case with the Nuggets. I know that to be a fact. The Rockies crowd is the Rockies crowd. They're not even there to watch baseball. And the Avalanche, I'll put the Avs up there, right there with the Broncos in terms of dedication and showing up and being there. I cannot speak to that. I will say that has been the Nuggets' lives since they got good. And I'm going all the way back to the George Karl Carmelo times. Like, that is very much about being, but that's an NBA culture thing. Right? NBA culture for fans is show up, be seen, snap your pics for Instagram, and get the heck out of there before the game is over. All right, let's move on here because the term Joker has come up quite a bit this offseason for the Denver Broncos, and they added Evan Ingram. Well, if you remember during the draft process, I identified a potential Joker for the Denver Broncos by the name of Tyler Warren. Now, unfortunately for the Broncos, he was not available when the Broncos were on the clock. He ends up in Indianapolis, and now that's who the Denver Broncos have to deal with on Sunday. So what do you do with a player like Tyler Warren that, if you read between the lines with Sean Payton, he's calling him a Joker?
In unique ways, they're moving him, doing things that are built around what we saw in college. You know, he's got snaps at Wildcat. We're going to see that this year. I don't know when. He's got, and so there obviously was a Warren plan, and you're going to have to defend that. And he's one of those guys you just say he's a real good football player.
Positionless, move them all around the field, get him touches in a variety of ways. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the definition of a Joker. And they are in rare supply. And the Denver Broncos will have to defend the Colts Joker. So how do you do that? And it goes back to my conversation with Jonathan Smith last hour. There is another couple, although one's not really looking very jokerish these days, and that is Travis Kelce. But there's another one in the Broncos division in Brock Bowers. Now, if you recall, Brock Bowers in the first meeting between the two teams last year kind of tore up the Denver Broncos. Had one huge play, I think it was for 57 yards. It was the touchdown. On that one, he outleapt PJ Locke for the ball. Pat Surtain was not covering him. Now, in the second meeting, Brock Bowers did not have nearly as good of a game as he did the first time around. And while Pat Surtain wasn't on him the entirety of the game, Bowers got 10 targets, and four of those 10, Pat Surtain was on him. Yes. Brock Bowers, the second meeting of last year, had 4 targets with Pat Surtain on him, and he mustered just one catch for 9 yards. And I think the game plan will be very similar. I don't think you put Pat Surtain on Tyler Warren like you put Pat Surtain on Jamar Chase. There are a lot of reasons. Jonathan Smith pointed one out last hour, I should say. They play Tyler Warren close to the line a lot, which would mess up everything that the Broncos are doing from a formation standpoint defensively. But if they split him out wide, that's where I think it would behoove the Denver Broncos to put Pat Surtain on him if they can. But I don't think it's quite as simple as just, hey, you got 84, follow him around. It's a little bit tougher to do with the tight end, especially one that would be in Sean Payton's offense considered a joker. But the more snaps that the Denver Broncos can put Pat Surtain on Tyler Warren, it will help. I don't think this is a game where you just simply, like the Titans game, say, get that guy, and then that case on Sunday was Calvin Ridley, just stay on him. I think you're going to see Surtain move back and forth. If they split out Tyler Warren or they show that they're going to do that quite a bit, then I think Surtain maybe takes him. But you can't forget about Michael Pittman. Michael Pittman against the Miami Dolphins had 80 yards and a touchdown. He was their leading receiver. As much as Tyler Warren felt like a focal point in that game, as much as they tried to get him the ball, Michael Pittman still ended up being their leading receiver. So it's not like even if the Broncos wanted to put Pat Surtain on Tyler Warren, that then the threat from the Colts offense would be neutralized. Still have a veteran, productive wide receiver in Michael Pittman. I think that's more of Pat Surtain's job. And then you use maybe a Talanoa Hufanga, who coming out of USC wasn't known for his coverage skills, has improved in that regard. Going back to the Brock Bowers 57-yard catch, the guy who's playing PJ Locke's position is Talanoa Hufanga, who had a great game on Sunday. But I think they're going to ask him to do something a little bit different. But I don't think you go into this with one set plan, Surtain on player X. I think it would be equally a mistake to put Pat Surtain on Michael Pittman and leave him there all game long as it would be for them to try and put Surtain on Tyler Warren all the time. I think you come out and you try to figure out other ways to limit Tyler Warren, and maybe on big third down plays or late in the game, maybe then you move Surtain and try to make more of a concentrated effort. But therein lies the trouble. And it goes to all those things that Sean Payton has talked about when it comes to having a joker. What it does is it creates a puzzle for defensive coordinators. Right? It's the formation. It's who you cover. They have to figure out those kind of things. And what the Colts envision by drafting Tyler Warren is to be able to create some of those problems for opposing defenses. So it's certainly not as simple of a game plan as it was in week one. As far as we got the defensive player of the year, let's just throw him on this guy and call it a day. The Colts present some more issues. And then if you ask Vance Joseph, it's neither Pittman nor Tyler Warren who's the most important player that they got to worry about on Sunday.
The back is the key, with the Colts. I mean, he's a special player, in my opinion. We saw it last year, so, Pittman's a great player also, 84 to tight end. So it's a different challenge, but it's the same challenge for us.
And that was responding to a question about the Colts being much better than the Titans. Right. And Vance Joseph saying Tennessee has NFL players, Colts have NFL players. That's a deflection. That's coach speak. Everybody and their cousin knows that the Tennessee Titans are at a different level than the Indianapolis Colts. Like, that's just what it is. But then there's the Jonathan Taylor. And if there was one weakness of the Broncos defense last season, it was the ability to stop the run. They did struggle at times doing that, and they struggled doing that against the Colts. In fact, the perfect example of that, the perfect frame of that game to look back on is Jonathan Taylor breaking a huge run that should have been a touchdown, and he dropped the ball at the 1 yard line and completely changed that football game. Jonathan Taylor was running all over the Denver Broncos. He was about to do it again, and he made a bonehead mistake that the Broncos pounced on, and they completely changed that the momentum of that football game. So there are a couple of pain points that the Colts do present. And these rosters aren't radically different than they were a year ago. So I think you can look at that game and draw some conclusions from it. So it starts with they got to stop Jonathan Taylor. Then it's what do you do with Tyler Warren? Who is Pat Surtain covering? And, oh, by the way, if you can create some pressure on Daniel Jones and really stress test this thing, really see that if this Indiana Jones thing is a thing. So there's a lot more on the Broncos' plate defensively than there was in week one. I think the Broncos being favored, even on the road, I think is fair. I do think there's a little bit of a letdown Colts-wise. I think from a performance perspective, they can't be as good as they were against Miami. Right? Can't be. But also, they had gone forever without winning a home opener. That was emotional. Jim Irsay, I get that this is a quality opponent, and the Colts know that. It's not, if they were playing the Tennessee Titans, for instance, it would be exactly labeled a letdown game. But I think there is some letdown for the Colts from week one to week two. So I think the Broncos are a better team. I think they should win. And I think even though the defense has more on their plate, I think they're up to the task. The other side of the football, meanwhile, they could use a little bit of help, I think, to have a good day on Sunday, and they might just have gotten it. I'll explain next on Extra Sports 1300. Looking for a place to watch Washington and Green Bay tonight? How about Cleats Bar and Grill? They're your football headquarters for Air Force college football and the Sunday ticket. I know not tonight's not Sunday, but just a good thing to keep in mind. They got 19 screens and they got a great Thursday night special, 10 wings and a 60-ounce pitcher of domestic draft for $20, or if you're a craft person, be $25. That's Cleats, 6624 Delmonico Drive. Some news that should be music to the ears of Broncos fans who are worrying about their offense. The Colts have a little bit of a problem when it comes to the cornerback position. Stephen Holder, who covers the team, says that number one corner Charvarius Ward is in concussion protocol. Backup Jalen Jones will be out for a while, according to Shane Steichen, with a hamstring injury. So the depth, not only the depth, but the top line talent of the Indianapolis Colts in the secondary is a little bit of a question. Now, the concussion protocol, it's like sending a spaceship to the dark side of the moon. You just got to kind of wait for them to come back around and see if they're okay. That's the concussion protocol. So it's entirely possible Ward comes out of it in time to play on Sunday, but it's certainly something to monitor. Now, that being said, there is an argument to say that the Broncos should attack the weakness of the Indianapolis Colts, using the same logic I used when it comes to the fact that the Denver Broncos were wrong to not run the football early on in the game against the Tennessee Titans. But you still have to consider who your quarterback is. That certainly should help Sean Payton game plan and attack when it comes to the passing game, but I still think you got to get the run game going. Sean Payton has talked about, and he talked about it again yesterday, the race to improve, the frenetic race to improve. With all due respect to the Colts and with all due respect to the Titans, these games are not about them. They are about the Chargers and the Bengals and the Eagles and the two matchups against Kansas City. It is about the Broncos getting better, getting right before the biggest games and their best opponents. That's what these games are about. And then, of course, they want to win along the way. I'm not saying winning is secondary. Winning is the primary thing. But you got to get the run game going. You got to help out Bo Nix. You can't put too much on him. And licking your chops and saying that the Colts might be down their number one corner and now let's attack them every single play is going, it won't work out for the Denver Broncos. It just won't, because Bo Nix is not ready to do that. Some of Bo Nix's worst performances have been when he throws 40 or more passes. Quality over quantity is the name of the game right now with Bo Nix. Great. They're a little bit weak in the secondary. Sean Payton, draw passing plays that will attack that. Bo Nix, target. And I wouldn't even go after the guy that's filling in for the number one guy. I'd go attack the guy who's now being bumped up from fourth on the depth chart to second because of all the injuries and go after him. There's probably more of a disparity in that from cornerback 4 to cornerback 2 than there is from 1 to 2. But fine, attack it when you do decide to throw the football. But this game is very much still about the Denver Broncos. Early on in the season, it is about your team and what you are doing right, what you are doing wrong, and what you want to get accomplished. And the Broncos have got to want to run the football. Because they're going to need it when they go up against the heavyweights that are on their schedule. So it's a balance. I understand that. And it's certainly something that as coaches are game planning, you look at and you say, who's healthy, who's not, who's missing. Let's go after that guy. I get that. You know, if John Day Barron was out on the field more than he's been, and if they threw him right in as, you know, maybe the second corner opposite Pat Surtain, or even had him just out on the field more, then if I'm an opposing offensive coordinator, I'm saying I'm going at that guy. I get that. That's all part of the game plan. It's a long game. There are a lot of plays. You can attack this aspect of the Indianapolis Colts. But your primary job, especially after what Sean Payton said about how he messed up the play calling on Sunday, you need to run the football. And just know that when you do decide to throw the football, there is a weakness that you can exploit. And it's a weakness, by the way, that you can further exploit, better exploit, when already you got the Indianapolis Colts caught between two minds on whether they should commit to stopping the run or worry about the pass. So running the football, being more balanced, having that game plan can actually help them further exploit what's going on with the Indianapolis Colts at the cornerback position. But certainly something to monitor as Charvarius Ward is in concussion protocol, and his backup is definitely not playing on Sunday. Now, for the Denver Broncos, I think it was Mike Kliss on social media brought up a really good point, because I don't think Dre Greenlaw is playing on Sunday. And now we're on to week 3. You could have put him on the IR, opened up a roster spot, and gotten him back for week 5. Why are the Broncos not doing that? Why are they going day by day with Dre Greenlaw? Why are we riding the roller coaster of Sean Payton not willing to give daily updates? I think the answer is fairly obvious. They believe that Dre Greenlaw will be healthy by week 4. And they want to have him. They got the Chargers week 3. They got the Bengals in that big Monday night tilt on week 4. But this is a player that injuries tend to linger. So the best laid plans of the Denver Broncos, I understand it. And really, who's the guy that you would say, oh, he would really help out the Denver Broncos? So we can't overthink this and be like, well, there's a guy sitting on the practice squad that the Broncos should definitely bring up, and it's affecting the team that they don't have this guy up because they're waiting for Dre Greenlaw to be healthy. Like, let's not go crazy here. If Dre Greenlaw takes a turn for the best and progresses and is ready to go, you'll want to be able to have him, whether it's week 1, 2, 3, or 4. But I don't think he's playing on Sunday. And I think that this is one of the bigger storylines that are emerging from this early part of the Denver Broncos season. They can't get Dre Greenlaw on the football field. Could that hurt them against Jonathan Taylor? Could that hurt them against Tyler Warren as they're trying to figure out how to handle the Colts version of the Joker? I think it does. I believe that the Broncos are the better team, but this is not going to be an easy game. This is not a gimme by any stretch of the imagination, and there are things that the Colts can do, even, yes, with Daniel Jones, and I'm not buying into the hype. All I'm saying about Daniel Jones is that he's a little bit more competent than Anthony Richardson was. And last year, Anthony Richardson was the quarterback for the Colts, and you know how that game went. It took some very boneheaded, two of them in general, the like double pass thing that they tried that was picked off by Benito and ran back for a touchdown. And then Jonathan Taylor dropping the ball at the 1 yard line. Two boneheaded mistakes that the Broncos did nothing. It wasn't a credit to the Broncos at all. It was the own buffoonery of the Indianapolis Colts that gifted the Broncos those opportunities and those points. So with a little bit more competent quarterbacking on the road, this is a tricky one. But if the Broncos are even the team I think they are, which is I'm a little bit more tepid in my expectation than many people are, I still think this is a game that they win. But there are some aspects of this team that the Colts can exploit, and it won't be an easy Sunday for the Denver Broncos at all. Broncos are favored by 2.5, though. Line has moved. Opened at 3.5, is now down to 2.5, 2 at some places. Oh, I think it's at 2 most places, 2.5 at some of the shops I frequent. 719-24-7-1313. If you want to get in here, we'll have more Drive Time Sports after this. Trans-Siberian Orchestra returns to Colorado Springs with its winter tour for 2 shows on Sunday, November 16th, 2:30 and 7:30 at the Broadmoor World Arena. Tickets go on sale tomorrow at 10 a.m., and you can get them at axs.com or in person at the Pikes Peak Center box office. There are 2 words that a head coach, 3 words. I can do math. 3 words that you never want to hear as a head coach. Players only meeting. And that is exactly what has occurred in Miami. It is one of the easiest sports tropes to spot and know what's coming next. The players only meeting, if it leads to another poor performance, will be the precursor to Mike McDaniel getting fired. And because of how bad week 1 was, right? It's not that you lose, it's how you lose in sports. And the Miami Dolphins got absolutely embarrassed by the Indianapolis Colts. And now they face I believe it's a divisional opponent with the New England Patriots. But if they fail to show up again, we might be talking about our first coaching change just 3 weeks into the season. It feels early, but also week 1 feels early for a players only meeting. I mean, this is such an obvious sign that the Miami Dolphins are not responding to Mike McDaniel. There is no reason. There could be a group chat. You can do a group chat without the coach. You can go and, get dinner or something and discuss it without the coach, but a formal players only meeting, letting that leak out that you're having a formal get together at work without your boss. The primary topic of conversation, even though according to ESPN, it's to make sure they're all on the same page. Yeah, make sure that they're all on the same page, that they don't want to play for Mike McDaniel anymore. The coach is the topic. And it's rarely good. They're not usually speaking highly of the head coach in those players only meetings. I knew this season was going to be bad for Miami. Through just 1 week, it is so much worse. And now you have, Mike McDaniel, and I get it. It's his personality. I'm not, the worst thing for Mike McDaniel to do would be to suddenly change it up and become like Mike Tomlin, right? Or Sean Payton, right? That's not who he is. But what did he say the other day? It can only get better. Like that dry wit, which it was very endearing at first with Mike McDaniel, it doesn't go over well. It doesn't go over well when you're getting absolutely embarrassed by the Colts in week 1. Doesn't hit the ears the same way. I know Mike McDaniel's not. This is his last season as Dolphins head coach. That is 100% the case. But does he survive the season? Does he survive the month? Those are real questions right now. And you have to, kind of look back and ask, how did this go wrong so quickly? And I think the answer is simple, because Miami looked really good. Now, they weren't winning big games or anything. They kind of had that label on them. But look, since the Super Bowl, John Harbaugh can't win big games. So there's coaches that survive for a long time without winning big. Sean McDermott doesn't win big games, or at least the biggest games. I would say that Sunday night game was a pretty big game, albeit in week 1. You can survive for a little while without winning the big one, right? Because if you're racking up wins, if you're routinely going to the playoffs, if you're generating that additional revenue for your owner, then you can hang around. It wasn't that. It was that Mike McDaniel never evolved to what you need your head coach to be. And the fact of the matter is, you can't always be the fun uncle. You got to be the parent. And right now, he has a wide receiver who is highly compensated and a supposed franchise quarterback that do not like each other, that do not trust each other. You have a fracture with two of the most important players on your team. And you have not been able to smooth that over. And what those two need is someone to come in with a heavy hand and say, knock it off. That's what Tyreek Hill and Tua need. Mike McDaniel's not that guy. And Mike McDaniel is a brilliant football mind. He's a brilliant football mind. But this is what we talk about all the time. There are coaches who are just better as coordinators. They just are. Vic Fangio is a great coordinator, and he was not a good head coach. Vance Joseph has been a pretty good coordinator. He was not a good head coach. Nathaniel Hackett, now the jury is out on whether he's even a good coordinator. But at the time when he was hired as the Denver Broncos coach, he was respected as a coordinator and could not, pardon the pun, hack it as a head coach. Some people are just not built for the ultimate leadership position. Some people are just not built to sit in the big chair. And part of it is your personality. Right? And I find Mike McDaniel very entertaining. I love listening to Mike McDaniel talk because his humor is my humor. I like Mike McDaniel a lot, but when you get in that chair, especially when you're in an organization that has known its fair share of dysfunction, and it is a little bit of a clown car organization, the Miami Dolphins. You need somebody to come in and lay down the law a little bit. And diagramming really fun passing plays is not going to do it. And look, the blame isn't solely on Mike McDaniel. Right? Like Tua with his health and his inconsistency in general. Tyreek Hill might be washed. They have made some bad investments. The owner and the general manager are not good at what they do. So it's not just Mike McDaniel, but when you have all of these other things going on, you need someone who can restore sanity to the organization. That you have to have somebody that can take control. Mike McDaniel he's not that guy. And I think that he'll catch on as a coordinator somewhere once he gets fired immediately. And I don't rule out him getting another head coaching job. But if you're going to be a team that is interested in Mike McDaniel as your head coach, man, you better already have a lot of good stuff going on. Because there's been a lot of bad stuff that has popped up with the Miami Dolphins, and Mike McDaniel just he's not equipped. And his shtick or personality or whatever you want to call it, it doesn't go over well when you get absolutely embarrassed like the Dolphins did in week 1. And it seems like the Dolphins have quit on him. That they're not listening to him. And this is a team, trust me, that needs coaching. They need to be coached up. And maybe Mike McDaniel can do that. It's the other stuff. Right? It's not the football necessarily, although I'm sure that Dolphins fans would have some problems with Mike McDaniel's play calling or his game plan in general. But I don't think that's his real weakness. It's the parenting, the babysitting, the CEO stuff, however you want to label it. It's that stuff, the handling personalities, handling grown men who are millionaires yet act like children. Or in Tyreek Hill's case, act even worse than children. The Miami Dolphins, they need a Harbaugh, they need a Peyton, they need somebody that can change that culture, and Mike McDaniel's not that guy. So if you're trying to set your weekend viewing, I'd keep an eye on that Miami game. And if it goes poorly, we might have some significant news come Monday. 719-24-7. 1313. Coming up next, we'll hit the 3 stories that are driving the show, and we'll preview the Commanders and Packers. Very good. I would say this Thursday night's matchup is better than last Thursday night's matchup. We'll talk about that too coming up here on Extra Sports 1300. Hello there. Welcome in hour 3 on this Thursday. So glad to have you, whether you're listening to the show on air, online, or through the Extra Sports 1300 app, or whether you're watching the show on our social media platforms, whether it be Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or Instagram at XTRA Sports 1300. If you would like to have your say in the matter, so to speak, you can drop a comment right there on social media, or you could call or text into the show 719-247-1313. Keep in mind, we got Commanders and Packers at the bottom of the hour for Thursday Night Football. But much to do in the meantime. Here are the 3 stories that are driving the show. All right, we start with Sean Payton saying Sunday's struggles of his young quarterback not on his young quarterback.
I don't know how many games I've called, but that's one of those where, you know, I came away from it like, man, I've got to be a lot better. And
I would agree with him. And even though I think the criticism of Bo Nix is warranted, especially when it comes to the histrionics and the getting into it with Jeffrey Simmons, I don't think that Sean Payton put Bo Nix in the best place to succeed, and I think he must do that on Sunday. Colts have a little bit of an issue when it comes to the cornerback position. Their number 1 corner is in concussion protocol. His backup has an injury that's going to definitely keep him out on Sunday, and this may appear to be a chance to once again showcase Bo Nix. I would advise against it. You have the chance, because you were able to escape with a win on Sunday, to correct your mistakes. Sean Payton talks about the race to get better. It applies to the play caller as well. Run the football. The Colts didn't seem overly concerned with it against the Miami Dolphins. That might be a reflection of their opponent more than who the Colts are fundamentally. But the Broncos need to come out and they need to run the ball. And we need to see what we saw late from J.K. Dobbins and R.J. Harvey, and then go from there. And then know that the secondary of the Colts can be exploited. But it would be even easier to exploit if the Colts had to also worry about the run game. I know Sean Payton doesn't want to be too predictable, but what was it? 13-4, 20-4. What was the ratio between pass and run? Yeah, even it up a little bit, I think is warranted here. And try to not make Bo Nix push so hard. Like, allow him to be a little bit calmer. Allow him to ease into the game. I think the Broncos need to do that on Sunday. They don't need a repeat of Bo Nix getting incredibly frustrated and forcing the issue, because this is a team in the Indianapolis Colts that he did force the issue quite a bit last year against, through 3 picks. So do in week 2 what you should have done in week 1. Come out, run the football, and take some pressure off of Bo Nix. Now, on the other side of the football, Vance Joseph certainly has his hands full more than he did in week 1.
The back is the key, with the Colts. He's a special player, in my opinion. We saw it last year, so Pittman's a great player also, 84 to tight end. So it's a different challenge, but it's the same challenge for us.
No, it's a different challenge. It's a much different challenge because, to your point, Vance, Jonathan Taylor is much better than any of the running backs you faced against the Tennessee Titans. Michael Pittman, Calvin Ridley, will call that a wash. And then you have 84, the tight end, as Vance Joseph calls him. I'd call him a joker. That term is not trademarked by Sean Payton. So I'm using it to apply to Tyler Warren. The most impressive player that the Colts had on Sunday outside of Daniel Jones was Tyler Warren, and Tyler Warren helped Daniel Jones look as impressive as he did. Broncos have talked a lot about having a joker and all that opens up for their offense. Well, now they got to go up against a team that has one. You're going to see Tyler Warren in a lot of different formations. They're going to look to give him the ball. They're going to look to create the matchup problems. You can't just Pat Surtain your way out of this one. Other guys on the Denver Broncos are going to have to step up going against Tyler Warren, because if he's able to get some things done, then it opens up the run game for Jonathan Taylor, and it opens up opportunities for a Michael Pittman. So this is a much more difficult test for the Broncos defense than it was 1 week ago. But what do you do with Tyler Warren, and what impact does that have on the rest of your defense? I think you put Surtain more often than not on Michael Pittman. I don't think he has to follow Michael Pittman around, because you may need him on Tyler Warren. And then it looks to me like Talanoa Hufanga's job. That would seem like the plan, but having Hufanga against Jonathan Taylor will work. This is a little bit of a puzzle that Vance Joseph has to figure out. It's easier when you have Pat Surtain to employ in some form or fashion, and it's easier to do when you know that Daniel Jones is not going to have all day to throw the football. But how the Broncos handle Tyler Warren, I think, will go a long way to deciding whether the Broncos defense has another really good day like they did on Sunday, or whether they struggle a little bit. And don't forget, too, going back to that Colts game last year, if it weren't for a couple of boneheaded mistakes by the Colts offense, that double throw or that throwback, whatever play they had that was picked off by Nick Bonito and Jonathan Taylor dropping the ball at the 1 yard line, that might have been a loss. And it might have been a crippling loss for that Denver Broncos season. So you see the quarterback, Daniel Jones. I get it. You don't believe in him. I don't particularly either, but I do like the weapons that he has. And the Broncos need to figure those guys out, especially number 84, the tight end, as Vance Joseph calls him. Story number 3 is a potential new development in the Kawhi Leonard case. Well, it's not really I guess NBA opened up an investigation, so I can call it a case. Pablo Torre with another bit of reporting, having paperwork that says that shortly after, not Steve Ballmer, but the minority owner, the limited partner, I think is what they call them, in the organization, wired almost $2 million? No. More than that. I'm getting my numbers off here. Yeah, no. 2 million. No, I had it right. 2 million. Wired $2 million to this fraudulent aspiration or aspire, whatever it's called, this fraudulent company, wired them as they were losing money, as they were having problems paying their bills. They got an influx of cash from the limited partner of the Los Angeles Clippers, and just a few days later turned around and paid $1.75 million to Kawhi Leonard for this quote-unquote endorsement deal that he had with them. I don't know if this is the smoking gun that the NBA needs to punish the Clippers and to void Kawhi Leonard's contract, but it is something. Now, it could leave in the possibility that Ballmer didn't know. It's becoming harder to envision that. But again, it wasn't Ballmer who put the money in. It was not in this case anyway. It was the only other guy that owns any percentage of the team that did this. So it is becoming more difficult to imagine that Steve Ballmer didn't know about any of this. But I think there's still some plausible deniability. It's just becoming less plausible by the day. But this is still the Clippers organization. Like, that's the thing, too. Now you have someone in the Clippers organization that is being linked to these payments for Kawhi Leonard. This isn't just Steve Ballmer invested some money and this company decided to turn around and pay Kawhi Leonard. This seems, I mean, the timing of it, the dollar amount, every day, and I think Pablo Torre is doing this on purpose. I don't think he just uncovered this since his last podcast. I think he's doing it intentionally to make the Clippers, it be more difficult for the Clippers to just blanket deny everything. Let the initial claim out, Clippers denied it. Said, oh yeah, how about this? And forcing them to continue to deny specific allegations instead of just blanketed saying, well, we didn't know anything about this. So whatever law firm or investigators that Adam Silver has on the payroll that he's putting towards this, he just needs to put Pablo Torre in charge of it. There's still a small window here where Steve Ballmer was in the dark. But, and then it would become like when we see these infractions that go on in college, like a Connor Stallions, just to use a fairly recent example. The ignorance is not an excuse, right? Even if you can suspend belief enough to think that Jim Harbaugh did not know what Connor Stallions was doing, it's his program. And this latest bit of reporting is that the only other guy other than Steve Ballmer who owns a piece of the LA Clippers is wiring this company money as it is failing. Not in the upstart stage. This is, we're in trouble. We need an influx of cash. They got one, and they seem to have turned around and taken the vast majority of it, and instead of paying debts to keep the lights on, they're paying Kawhi Leonard. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the three stories that are driving the show. Coming up next, a Browns player said something really, really dumb. And we'll look forward to the Thursday night football game between the Commanders and Packers. Consider this your last reminder to vote for our Extra Sports Athlete of the Week, sponsored by Blackjack Pizza and Salads. I'm looking at the voting right this second, and it is still a very tight race between Greg Moore of Lewis Palmer and Luke McAllister of Cheyenne Mountain, although there is still time. So cast your vote, extrasports1300.com. We'll announce the winner tomorrow. And while you're on the site, feel free to nominate another deserving student athlete that very likely will be included in our voting next week. That's extrasports1300.com for the Extra Sports Athlete of the Week, sponsored by Blackjack Pizza and Salads. One thing, I didn't talk about it already. Maybe I should have, just to say what I'm about to say. Pat Bryant's getting the Marvin Mims treatment, and people are not reacting the way they should be reacting. Pat Bryant only got 4 snaps on Sunday, and Sean Payton was asked about that and said, quote, "I just think in our groupings we can improve that." Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. He did this with Marvin Mims for like 12 weeks last year. If he wanted to pay Pat Bryant, he would have. Okay? This is Sean Payton we're talking about here. I understand, one mea culpa. Okay. The mea culpa that he made about the play calling, all right. I could see that. I could see it being an earnest one. But Sean Payton going, I messed up the play calling. I should have gotten Pat Bryant on the field. No way. No way. They threw the ball 40 times. Okay. It wasn't like he forgot Pat Bryant was on the roster. All right. If he wanted to play Pat Bryant, he would have. He did this all year with Marvin Mims. Eventually, Marvin Mims did get more snaps, but it wasn't when people started asking. Pat Bryant clearly is not ready to be out on the field regularly for Sean Payton. That's just what it is. This is not Sean Payton needing to do better. Again, they threw the ball 40 times. Cortland Sutton was out there 95% of the time. They were very aware of who they had on the field. And if they wanted Pat Bryant out there, he would have been out there. He's a rookie. He's down the pecking order. They got to figure out the second pass catching option outside of Cortland Sutton before they worry about spreading the wealth to 8 different guys. Right? Stop being so overly reliant on Cortland Sutton. Do that, and then we can worry about, 5 or 6 wide receivers at any given time can pop up and beat you. He's got to get Troy Franklin going. He's got to get Evan Ingram going. Got to involve the running backs. There are a lot of mouths to feed. I understand that. Pat Bryant's low on the list. Eventually, I'm sure we'll be talking about a Pat Bryant game. I don't think it will be this Sunday. I don't think there is a correlation. I don't think those dots should be connected. If Pat Bryant was trusted, I guess, for lack of a better word, by Sean Payton, he would have been out there. Just not ready yet. Later round pick, rookie, first NFL game. Didn't feel like he was ready. I don't think that's disparaging Pat Bryant. Yeah, I didn't read that the same way. People were like, oh, watch out for Pat Bryant. No, did this with Marvin Mims last year. There are other guys that the Broncos got to worry about, and they got to run the football. Can Pat Bryant run block? Because then he'll be out there. Because that's what the Broncos need to do more than worry about Pat Bryant getting on the field more. Grant Delpit of the Cleveland Browns said something very, very stupid. And I don't know Grant Delpit. I'm sure he's a very bright guy. He said a stupid thing. He was asked how difficult it is to bring down Derrick Henry. And his answer, not very hard. Why? Why would you say that? Like, there are not a ton of players. Let's not even talk about other positions. Let's just talk about running backs. Okay? There are 3, maybe. Maybe I'm missing one. Right now, I'll go with 3 running backs that can make you eat your words. Right? And can embarrass you. Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey when healthy, and Derrick Henry. Those are not bears that you want to poke. Because they are so supremely talented that they can identify you on the field, they can seek you out, and they can make a fool of you. That's just a really, really dumb thing to say. Especially given that you know you're going to get everything the Ravens got. Everything that has been discussed about another big, important game, high-profile game that the Ravens lose. All this stuff about Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson and that fan. Why would you do this? Not smart, especially when you're playing for the Cleveland Browns. By the way, Derrick Henry's over-under for rushing yards, 95.5. Juice to the over, minus 111. As somebody who has Derrick Henry on his fantasy team, elated. I love this. But it will not end well for poor Grant Delpit. All right, we got Washington. We got Green Bay. Should be a really good matchup. I'll take the Commanders and the points. Commanders getting 3.5, depending on where you shop. I'll take the Commanders. Jaden Daniels going into Lambeau, being the first quarterback since Jay Schroeder to win in Lambeau. And you know how I feel about the Packers. But I think tonight has the chance to be a really good game. So yeah, I think I'll take Washington in the point. We'll find out. Enjoy the game. Packers, Commanders now on Extra Sports 1300. I'll talk to you tomorrow.